Is this the end of the US dollar? For 50 years, the world has operated on the petro-dollar standard. This has given the United States enormous financial power and the ability to project military power all over the globe. But recent events show this power is about to come to an end. What does this mean for the world? And what does this mean for Bible prophecy? Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Yesterday, we talked about a coming Lehman moment, meaning just like in 2008 when Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, it caused panic in the global financial markets. Something similar was going to happen soon, and it would really devastate Western financial markets. Today, we're going to talk about the US dollar and the implications for the US dollar as we head into this time of financial turmoil. And more importantly, if the dollar is coming to an end, what will replace it as the world's standard? We're going to talk about that. The media has been sending us a whole lot of signals of what that will be just in the last 10 days. We're going to go over those, so you're going to want to wait to the end of this video to make sure you understand very clearly. They're telling us what comes next. So let's talk about this. Yesterday we talked about fiat currencies, these currencies that are put out by the government, the yen, the pound, the dollar, the euro. All of these currencies, they're not really backed by anything except faith that they have purchasing power. And as long as people have that faith, they'll continue to work. But governments are facing a massive problem now with inflation. And they can try to rein in that inflation right now by raising interest rates, but that's going to devastate their economy. It's going to raise the debt load, the amount of interest they pay on the debt they already have, and these are very indebted countries we're talking about. So that risk basically a debt spiral that will collapse those economies. So you're looking at depression if governments head down this road of trying to raise interest rates. If they don't, and they try to artificially suppress those interest rates, well, they have to print their currencies to go out and buy their debt. What's that going to do? That shell game, because that's all it is going to create hyperinflation. So they can choose depression or hyperinflation. Not really the best choices, but those are the only choices they have right now. We're headed down one road or the other, and both lead to financial chaos on a global scale, social unrest. It's not going to go to a pretty place. What does all this mean for the dollar? Because we've talked about these central banks, they can't simply print oil. They can print their currency, but they can't print oil or food. Well, for the United States, that hasn't really been the case since, okay, so if we go back in time to post-World War II, the world implemented this system known as Bretton Woods. And the Bretton Woods system basically said the United States will back the dollar with 40% gold, right? And this could be, dollars could be converted into gold by foreign governments, not individuals, but foreign government could come to the United States, say, we have these dollars, we're going to trade them in, and they could get gold back. So the dollar was convertible into gold. But in 1971, Richard Nixon closed that gold window. Why? Because the world had woken up to the fact that the United States was printing more dollars than they had gold, and they were starting to convert those dollars into gold. They didn't trust the United States anymore, so that faith was lost. The gold started to come out of the United States. To keep that from happening, Richard Nixon closed the gold window. Well, this caused immediate inflation of the US dollar, and in order to keep that from becoming hyperinflation, the United States brokered a deal with the Saudi royal family that the United States would offer military protection to Saudi Arabia and the Saudi royal family in particular in exchange for them only trading their oil in US dollars. And this system went into place where oil was traded on world markets only in dollars. The US dollar became the #1 currency for world trade. This gave the United States enormous power because essentially it meant if oil is traded in dollars, well, the United States they can print oil. They print these dollars and they go and buy oil with it. So you can see the power this gives the United States. But this system not only is coming to an end, we can say it has pretty much come to an end. And we're going to look at this article from Tuesday that pretty much clarifies that point. This is from oilprice.com. It says Saudi Arabia reiterates commitment to China regardless of U.S. concerns. It says apparently confirming the view of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that the U.S. is now regarded as just another one of its partners in a new global order that would see Beijing and its allies share the leadership position with Washington. Saudi Arabia last week reiterated its commitment to China as its most reliable partner and supplier of crude oil. I think what they meant was Saudi Arabia being a supplier to China, not the other way around, but that reads sort of funny. Along with broader assurances of its ongoing support in several other areas. That MBS seemingly now sees the U.S. as a partner just for its security considerations with no meaningful quid pro quo, meaning you don't expect anything in return, America. Sure, you can offer us military protection, but we're not going to do anything for you. On Saudi Arabia's part, while regarding China as its key partner economically and Russia as its key partner in energy matters, should not surprise the U.S. Back in March last year, it was made clear enough at the annual China Development Forum hosted in Beijing when Aramco CEO Amin Nasser said ensuring the continuing security of China's energy needs remains our highest priority, not just for the next 5 years, but for the next 50 and beyond. And yet the U.S. is surprised by the apparent finalization of the transition of Saudi Arabia away from Washington and toward China, which effectively marks the end of the 1945 core agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that defined their relationship up until extremely recently. It says this transition has been seen most recently in the refusal of MBS to even take a telephone call from Joe Biden. Do you remember that? That was a big deal. That was intentional. That was meant to send a signal to the United States. We don't even have to take your phone calls. Who do you think you are? That's what that was. It says his refusal to take a phone call from President Joe Biden in which he was to ask for his help in bringing down economy crimping high energy prices. And then, in the huge cut in collective OPEC oil production that has only added to energy-driven inflation fears in global economies. So this is twice that Joe Biden, the United States, have been snubbed by Saudi Arabia. First was this refusal to even take a phone call. And then Biden went and pleaded for OPEC to not cut production, and they did it anyway. That was maybe a month, 2 months ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. The rest of this article goes on to explain some of this, but of course, as I always say, the lead is usually buried way down at the bottom, so we're going to skip all the way down here to the bottom. This next to last paragraph, where we just get this huge revelation that's like, why is this not the lead of the story? It says, given the transition of Saudi Arabia away from the United States and toward China, and the senior Saudis do look at the issue in these terms, whatever they say publicly, there is also every reason to expect Riyadh to continue to back China's efforts to undermine the power of the US dollar and the global energy markets as well. Not only is Saudi Arabia now a prime mover in advancing the China GCC free trade agreement, a key aim of which is to forge a, quote, deeper strategic cooperation in a region where U.S. dominance is showing signs of retreat, but also the kingdom is now a prime advocate for switching away from the hegemony of U.S. dollars and the pricing of global oil and gas. In other words, they would overturn the system that's been in place for about 50 years at this point. And then we read down more. It says, moreover, in recent reports, they state that long-running talks between Saudi Arabia and China for Saudi Arabia to price and receive payments for some of its oil sales in Chinese renminbi rather than in US dollars have intensified in the past few months. So we're seeing this system This petrodollar system that's been in place, it's been the main driver of global trade for the last 50 years, coming to an end. This means the US will lose its reserve currency status, the preeminence of the dollar in world trade will go away. It's been waning for a number of years, so this isn't an overnight process. Doesn't mean that the US turns into a hyperinflation overnight, but it means the US is losing its dominance, much the way we saw the British Empire and the British pound lose its dominance in the first part of the 20th century. So, why is all this happening? What are some of the reasons? Well, we can go back in time to last year. The story is from August 24th of 2021. I want you to think back of maybe what events were in the news around that time, what was dominating the headlines, and then we'll come back to that in a second. It says Russia, Saudi Arabia signed military pact amid, well, here we go, Biden chaos in Afghanistan. So that was what was in the headlines at the time, was this chaos in Afghanistan. So this says Saudi and Russian officials Tuesday announced the signing of military cooperation pact between the two countries. Saudi Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman announced the agreement via Twitter, stating it would aid in developing joint military cooperation between the two countries. In a second tweet, he elaborated on his meeting with his Russian counterpart, in which the pair explored ways to strengthen the military and defense cooperation between our two countries. See a picture of that tweet there, and it says neither signatory party specified any of the deal's terms, but noted the signing occurred outside of an arms expo in Moscow. Russia is the world's second largest arms exporter, aside from the United States, while Saudi Arabia is the #1 state purchaser of military hardware. The United States has historically been a major supplier of weapons to the Saudi monarchy. Former President Donald Trump maintained close ties with Riyadh, aiming to bolster the regime against Iran. His arms sales to the Saudis prompted congressional rebuke, and Trump subsequently vetoed measures to block arms sales to the country. President Biden, however, reversed course and suspended arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates this year. So let's think about what this means. So we went from a posture of friendliness toward Saudi Arabia to one where a journalist had been executed by the Saudi regime, so that became bad. We can't deal with them. We're not going to sell arms to them, taking more of this aggressive adversarial posture towards Saudi Arabia. And then, and here's the clincher, we had what happened in Afghanistan. And we could call it the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, but a better way to describe that would be the U.S. abandonment of Afghanistan. So the United States went into Afghanistan in 2001 to remove the Taliban, which they did, and then they abandoned Afghanistan a little over 14 months ago, and the Taliban came right back into power, and in some cases the exact same people are in leadership positions that were in positions in 2001 when we went in. So Afghanistan was not left in a state of prosperity and freedom and liberty, and we simply pulled out because they could handle things on their own. They were abandoned. American citizens were abandoned behind enemy lines. People who gave aid and helped the United States during those 20 years paid a very hefty price when they were abandoned and left behind enemy lines. And so this obviously did not go unnoticed by the other nations of the world, particularly Saudi Arabia, who had this long-standing agreement with the United States that you will protect us. Well, when they saw what happened to Afghanistan, how do you think they felt? And we see that they immediately went out and brokered this defense pact, an agreement with Russia. And so that is just one nail in the coffin of this petrodollar system. We're seeing more and more with the article we just read before about China and repricing oil and currencies other than dollars. This is showing this dollar system is breaking down as we speak, and Saudi Arabia is not alone. We can come over here and we look at this article from Nikkei Asia. It says Japan seeks to stay in Russia's Sakhalin-1 energy project after Exxon exit. The Japanese government has decided to remain involved in the formerly Exxon-led Sakhalin-1 oil and gas project in Russia as it seeks a stable supply of energy despite international sanctions on Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. It says the group of 7 nations decided in May to ban imports of Russian crude oil. Although the G7 did not decide on a time frame, saying only that the ban will be enforced in a timely and orderly fashion, Japan's continued participation in Sakhalin-1 would go against the consensus among fellow G7 members, as Japan relies on the Middle East for 95% of its crude imports. It sees ownership in Russian projects as essential to ensuring a stable supply of energy. So here we see another example. First it's Saudi Arabia, now it's Japan. But can you see a pattern here? There's a pattern where we have, in the past, the US dollar was dominant. Now we're seeing that real things of value that hold their value are dominant, predominantly energy, right? So Japan is willing to go against the consensus, go against what the US would want and other Western nations would want in order to secure their energy. So what's more valuable, ones and zeros and a piece of paper and this promise from a government, or oil, natural gas? Oil and natural gas are measured in real terms, a barrel of oil, a cubic meter of gas, whereas a dollar, well, what does that really mean? Its purchasing power has declined quite a bit over time. I mean, if you look back over the last 50 years, the US dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. So countries want to retain their purchasing power, and they're turning away from dollars and they're turning more toward real things. And so we've seen, and we've talked about in the past with the BRICS nations, talking about creating their own currency backed by commodities. And we've seen Saudi Arabia come out and say, we want to come to your summit next year and we want to join the BRICS nations. So these are very powerful nations with vast natural resources. They create a lot of the world's commodities, and they're saying, we want fair payment for our commodities. We don't want these dollars anymore that are losing their purchasing power. We want real things. And if there's any doubt that any of this is happening, we can turn to this article, which says gold. Central banks buy record amount of gold in the third quarter. Central banks bought more gold than ever last quarter, according to the World Gold Council's third quarter report released on Tuesday. But a huge chunk of these purchases is from anonymous buyers. The level of official sector demand in the third quarter is a combination of steady reported purchases by central banks and a substantial estimate for unreported buying, the report reveals. Notably, the biggest known buyers were from emerging markets, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Qatar. The demand for the precious metal, according to the World Gold Council, has returned to pre-pandemic levels. Purchases amounted to a record-breaking total of almost 400 tons, marking a 300% jump year over year. Year to date, central bank purchases are at 673 tons, already more than any annual total since 1967, when the US dollar was still backed by the precious metal. So that's the key sentence right there. Let's think about that. So central banks are purchasing more gold now than they have since 55 years ago. What was happening 55 years ago? Well, the Bretton Woods agreement, that standard, was falling apart. Countries saw that the United States was more and more unable to meet its obligations. They started to doubt, can the United States really convert these dollars into gold? And we know that they couldn't, because 4 years later, from when this massive central bank buying was taking place, the U.S. closed that gold window and we went to a new standard. We went from Bretton Woods to the petrodollar standard. Now we're seeing more of this increased central bank gold buying, the most since then when a new system emerged. That's a signal telling us that a new system is going to emerge soon. What is that system? Is that system a new gold standard? No, it's not going to be a new gold standard. But what they're going to do is they're probably going to take gold and other commodities and pledge it to some sort of blockchain-based new monetary system. So what does that mean? Well, the media has been telling us that. They've been signaling that through the stories that have been coming out over the last 7 to 10 days. Stories like this one. It says Kazakhstan to build central bank digital currency on BNB chain. All right, so central bank digital currencies, that's what's coming next. And we get this one. India's central bank to test central bank digital currency on November 1st. And we talked about before, India bought enormous amounts of silver recently. Are they going to pledge that to back their central bank digital currency? Who knows? Here we have Canada launches crypto and central bank digital currency consultation following increased use cases in the country. And we have new UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak launching support for central bank digital currencies. What are they? And what could happen next? And then we have this one from Yahoo News that says New York Fed official, digital dollar could speed foreign exchange settlement. So what does all this mean? Well, they are telling us that central bank digital currencies are the next system. Bretton Woods, petrodollar. Next, it's going to be central bank digital currencies. What does all this mean? How does this fit into Bible prophecy? Well, it has multiple implications. First, the Bible doesn't talk at all about U.S. power in the end times. So the U.S., as we go into the end times, we'd expect U.S. power to wane or simply go away, simply collapse. And if we see an abandonment of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, if we see the destruction in the Western financial markets that is set to come from these derivative implosions, then we would see that U.S. power go away. What does that mean for the power of Russia, who has vast quantities of gold and natural resources and is pushing toward this BRICS? Well, it would mean that going into the Gog of Magog invasion, we would expect to see Russia's power increase. And that's what we're seeing here. We would also expect to see a transition as we go into the end times toward some sort of electronic government-dominated currency system in order for the mark of the beast to be rolled out, in order to control who can buy and sell anything. We would expect to see a system like that start to be put into place and people become conditioned to it. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. They're telegraphing that when this system collapses, and it will collapse, we went over that yesterday, it's inevitable. It's only a matter of timing of when, not if. And the when is coming real soon. Once that happens, what will be the replacement? They're telling us it's going to be central bank digital currencies. Why? That gives them more power and more control. And they want to lord it over the population. And of course, all this lays the foundation and sets the stage for the mark of the beast. So it shows we are living in the season of the Lord's return. He told us, when you see all these things happen, know that I'm right at the door. My return is near. So guys, again, this sounds like bad news, but it's not, because the good news is Jesus is coming back. So what do you think? Is the dollar's power coming to an end? Is America's power coming to an end? Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. I think they're sending a pretty loud and clear message through the media. This is where we're headed next. And it's just a matter of, is it months away, a couple of years away? I don't know. But they're telling us this is what's coming. So, guys, make sure to like and share this. God willing, See you on Monday.
If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.